crafters, and welcome back to my YouTube channel. My name is Deepa from DeeZinesByD, and today I have a gingerbread Scrappy Tales post for you. So today we're going to be making this gingerbread house center step fun fold card. Now, we're just going to be using one set from Scrappy Tales, and that is this A7 Storefront gingerbread add-on. So you can see that if you do have the A7 size Storefront pop-up dies, the base dies, you can add all of these dies to it to create a gingerbread house. But I wanted to show you how to do that with just the dies and a fun fold card. So first of all I really did to prep for this card was a whole bunch of die cutting. I took all of those little dies from the set. I cut them all up with my steel cutting tool. And then I started cutting to my heart's desire. And what I like to do is kind of do all my cutting in front of my iPad, watching something relaxing or fun. And I use my small Sizzix Sidekick to cut everything out. What I did was I grabbed a couple of paper pads with like two colors, and that's my color theme or my color scheme. And then I also cut out the rest, most everything else out of white cardstock. I'm going to add color later or just use it plain white. So these are the two paper packs I used. They're Recollections paper packs, and you can see you get some glitter cardstock and some plain cardstock. And I just cut out everything that I felt I would need for the entire gingerbread house. Now for the white pieces like this one here, I'm adding ink to it in order to make it look more like gingerbread. Now the first color of ink I'm using is Paper Bag, and these are all Altenew inks. I grabbed the inks that work the best or what I have sitting on my craft table. So I have Paper Bag, I'm adding some mocha ink to it just to darken it up a little. And then on the edges, I'm darkening the edges with some espresso ink. So I find that darkening the edges really makes it look like a cookie, because once it's baked, the edges are darkened, especially for gingerbread. And the tone of the cookie, it kind of varies. I tried to make it look splotchy, but the nature of these inks is to even out over time. So they did even out, but it still has that gingerbread look to it. So I went ahead and continued this process of adding the ink to the pieces that I wanted to look like gingerbread. So I've got the door front, the Christmas tree, and the gingerbread man. Now keep those inks aside because we're also going to need it for our card base to make the actual gingerbread house. Now, moving on, I basically, once I had everything once I had everything cut out, I then had to paper piece and put everything together. Now, for the candy canes, there is another die where you can cut out the little sections, and I used that for the candy canes that are facing to the right. Now, for the ones that are facing to the left, you have to cut it a little differently. You basically turn your cardstock over to the side that you're not going to use, cut that out, and then it will cut out the opposite side for you. So you can see here, all I did was I cut it out on the white side of the cardstock, and the glitter side is my good side, is what's going to show. And by doing that, I now get the left side, or the left-handed, or whatever you want to call them, the candy canes that face with the hook to the left. So now all I have left to do is just basically attach all of those little pieces to the candy cane. Now I tend to do all of my die cutting ahead of time, and then I piece it together. If I weren't doing videos to show you my process, I probably would cut it, especially for dies like this where you want to keep the sections and know where they go. I'd cut it and paper piece, and then I'd do the next thing, cut it and paper piece, rather than doing everything at once. Everybody has their own process, and I find sometimes that is a little easier to do than cutting everything out. Now I'm going to go ahead and put together these cookies. So these outlines are basically what I would think would be the icing that goes on top of the cookie. So I've put the icing, which is like a light green or aqua-ish color for the tree, and then I've got like a light pink for the gingerbread man. I believe there's also little bow dies and stuff that are within the set that you could use to dress up this gingerbread man, but I wanted to keep him nice and simple. Now there is a little face that you can cut out. Now keep in mind these pieces are really small, so you do want to keep them aside, or as I'd mentioned earlier, cut them out and put them on your gingerbread man right away so that you don't lose your pieces. And you know, this little embellishment tool really comes in handy if you have maybe a pick or something, some type of wand to kind of put these little pieces onto the glue on the gingerbread man. Really come in handy. My wand is actually pretty cheap, just off of Amazon, and you can see it looks pretty nice to have in your pictures and stuff as well. So moving on, I've done the tree and the man. Now I did also make the door look more gingerbready. So there's an outline for the door, and the door is cool because it's got like a little fold there, so you can actually attach it and have it have some movement, open and close. So the outline I'm going to keep white, like white icing. And then I'm adding the little door elements. I've got some glitter for the glass. I've got the lighter aqua blue for the frame of the window. And then I've got a little swirl that I'm adding underneath the door because you know gingerbread cookies have those little extra decorative elements. So that looks a little more realistic. Now, I did attach this all to a piece of cardstock because they're all kind of inlay pieces, and I did want the door to be one complete piece. So now I'm just cutting around the largest die cut of the door there, and I'm going to fold over that flap to attach the door. And that door is ready to go. So I'm just using my scoring tool, or you can use a bone folder to reinforce that fold. So moving on, we've got the cute lollipops. You know, if I were to make another card with these gingerbread bits, it would be all of these little candies. I love like little die cuts and pieces like this. I have other cards where I've used the smaller pieces from these die sets, and Scrappy Tales is known for having all of those extra little die cuts. I mean, Sabrina does a great job of putting in all the little things that you might need for your design. And I love taking those little dies and using them to make backgrounds or to be like the main focus of my card rather than just being those little detail bits. I will link a video up in the top right hand corner here where I did that with a past set. It gives you just an idea of how you can do that with a nice color scheme and get them to be the center stage of your card. So you can see that I've attached those outline lollipop bits to the glitter backgrounds just to create a bit of contrast and have them stand out a little more. And now I'm piecing together, sorry it's a little bit off to the right of the screen, the little window sills with the little snowy bits at the top. And then I have these gumdrops. Oh, I love these gumdrops. They're so small, but they're so cute. I love all the tiny little pieces like this. So there is one die that cuts out 3 of these little mounds of snow to place on top of the gumdrops. You can make them snow like me. You can make them little bits of sugar over the top. And stay tuned because later on, I will be showing you how I add snow to my card to make it have a bit more texture and depth. So now we're moving on to these peppermint swirls or candy swirls, whatever you want them to be. Now, I've always been told I'm a weirdo for this, but please do let me know if any of you are like me because I would love the company. But I don't like peppermint. I don't like mint, anything about it. I don't know. I don't like it. I never have. And so that's part of the reason why my swirls are more like candy. This, I know, maybe the peach one's more of a strawberry flavor. Maybe the aqua one is more of, I don't know, a blueberry type flavor, but they're not mint on my card. So anyways, I've put those little pieces together to create the swirls. And all of my little die cut pieces are put aside and put together and ready to go. So let's go ahead and work on the card base. What you're gonna need is a 5.5 by 11-inch piece of cardstock. So I just kind of cut this cardstock down the length. Now I have a little guide that I'm gonna put up on the screen. You can always pause and refer back to that, or there is the same guide up in my blog, which is linked in the description below. So the guide by itself is pretty much self-explanatory, but I will go through this step by step with you. So the first thing I'm going to do is measure in 1 inch from either side on the length, the longest side of my cardstock in. Okay. Then I'm going to measure up from the bottom to 6.5 inches. So I just made tick marks. Now I'm going to draw a line from that 6.5 inch down to where the 1 inch mark is on my ruler. Okay. So your line is just going to be in the middle of the paper there. It's not going to go right down to the bottom. Now I'm also kind of just marking off that 1 inch mark with my score tool. And I'm actually scoring a line at 1 inch in down to the line that we drew, to the pencil line. I'm going to do that again and score a line down from 2 inches to the pencil line we drew, both on the top and the bottom. So they're matching on the top and the bottom of this page lengthwise. Now I'm going to do the exact same thing, but I'm going to score it at the top and the bottom into the line that we drew, the pencil line, at 6.5 inches. Now, once that's done, you should have 3 scored lines at the top and bottom at 1, 2, and 6.5 inches. Now for our final score line, I'm going to measure up to 5.5 and I'm going to score it not from the edge of the card, but from that pencil mark. So from the pencil line to the second pencil line at the bottom, I'm scoring it at 5.5 inches. And those are all the score lines that you need. So you've got 1, 2, 6.5 inches lines at the top and bottom, and then you've got a score line at 5.5 in the center. So the next step, all you're going to need to do is add some cuts. And there's only 2 cuts. I recommend using a steel ruler because a plastic ruler can sometimes, your knife can cut into it and your line is not going to be straight. I'm just simply cutting along that line and I'm stopping where the line stops. Okay, so you're not going to cut all the way through to the bottom of that card. You're going to basically have 2 bars on either side that kind of look like 2 sides of a frame. And you'll see that my second cut didn't go all the way through. Not to worry, just go over the line again and it will cut nicely. So once you've got your cuts done, then all you have to do is fold it. And the folding is pretty easy. All of these score lines get folded into a mountain fold except for those 2 little score lines on either side that were scored at 2 inches, okay? And you'll see it come together as you fold it. So it really isn't too hard to figure out. And once you've got it pretty much folded, then you can reinforce your score lines with your bone folder, or in my case, my scoring tool. And there you have the card base for your center step card. So once that's done, I'm going to go ahead and work on my roof. So for my roof, as I mentioned, I don't have the actual dies for the A7 storefront pop-up. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create my own roof. So I'm just taking a rectangle here. I'm rounding out all of the edges, and then I'm just going to cut a small sliver of a triangle off of each end to create a roof-like shape. Now to maintain the curve of that roof, I'm also using my curved punch to punch the corners of the top of that card base so that it matches. So once that's done, now I want to add color to my card base. So I've got this Post-it removable tape here. This is like a labeling tape, and I find that it works perfect for masking off larger areas that you might want to be adding ink to. That's exactly what I'm doing here, and I'm not measuring any lines or using any rulers. I'm just kind of lining this up with the cuts that we made and the score lines that we made earlier. And in the end, you can see that I've basically masked off the center of this card, which is going to be the actual gingerbread house portion of the card. Now, I mentioned earlier to keep aside those few inks that we use to add color to the gingerbread cookies, the tree, the door, and the gingerbread man. And that's because we're going to need to match the color of those gingerbread cookies or pieces to the actual rest of the gingerbread house. So now I'm using those same colors and I'm laying them down on my gingerbread house in the same manner that I did on the cookies. So I'm adding the Ultra New paper bag ink first, which is a nice like light brownie color. I'm adding the mocha on top to darken it up a little. And then I'm adding some espresso ink along the edges to darken up the edges just as cookies would be darkened. And I'm going to do that not only to the center of this panel, but I'm also going to do it to the roof that I cut out as well. Now, you could use any inks that you wanted. You could use oxide inks, distress inks, you could use other brands of inks. It's completely up to you. These are just my go-to inks because I do recommend having one line of inks that you like that you buy everything of. If you're going to be like a crafter and you want to have that ability to do whatever you want with your inks, I really do recommend getting all the inks of one brand and all of the re-inkers. So that way, if you want to do things like using your ink pads directly on paper and stuff, you don't have to worry because you've always got those re-inkers. Not to mention, it's just a bit more cost effective than having everything of every brand, right? We all can't afford all of that. So moving on, I'm going to again be using the Ultra New inks, and I'm using some iceberg ink for the bottom half of this card to be the snow. And I'm masking off the bottom half first. I added the snow portion there, and then I'm going to mask off the left and the right hand sides, which is going to end up being the rest of my snow or the sky. And I'm just using some blue inks. I'm using Ultramarine near the top, which is a darker ink. I'm using Eastern Sky in the center to kind of create a bit of a gradient, and then it'll blend into that iceberg at the bottom. So as I mentioned before, this goes on a little splotchy, but most inks, including this Ulta New ink, they tend to even out as they dry. So right now it looks a little splotchy as I've put it on, but once it dries, the blending will look much better. And you can always change this design up to work for you. You don't have to make it a snowy background like I have. You can make it a night scene and have some snow falling, or just have some stars in the sky. You could have maybe a sunset, at different times of the day. You can make these panels look completely different. It's totally up to you. Now that bottom portion of this design, really, I didn't have to add that color there because I am going to be adding some snow mounds at the bottom, and it'll probably get covered up, but I just added it in case there are little portions of it that show through in the corners. So now that I've added all my ink, you can see it's starting to kind of come together. We'll go ahead and add the roof of the gingerbread house, and I'm just doing that with some foam squares because a roof's not completely flat on a house, right? You need it to have a bit of dimension, so we'll stand that up a little with the foam. Then we can start putting this together. So I've got the little swirly bits, which are or the squiggly, but I don't know what you would call it, but it's the decoration of like piping that you put on your gingerbread house or gingerbread cookies. I'm going to add those two little squiggly bits to the top and bottom of the roof, and then I'm going to save the center there for the sentiment, which I'll add later on. And as you can see, these squiggly bits are a little bit longer than my roof. As you know, we're making this and tailoring it to work for our card. And then once that's done, I can work on my snow mound. So here's where I'm going to show you how I like to add my snow to cards. And lately, I've been all about this technique here, and I've been adding it to all of my cards. So all I've done is I've added some glue, liquid glue, to the top edges of those mounds of snow. And now I'm adding some Simon Says Stamp Unicorn Chunky Glitter to it. And I've had this glitter sitting around for quite a while, but I haven't actually used it much. And I really don't know why, because it looks so stunning and looks like glistening snow. It's perfect for this. Now to add some texture to this, I've got this material here, and it's actually imitation snow. And I think the equivalent to that would be Tim Holtz Mica Flakes. I would have gotten the Mica Flakes to use, but I realized that I had this sitting around. So I've decided to add that on top of the glitter, and it just adds that fluffy snow and texture to your image and really brings it to life. You can see how great that looks. Okay, now let's put those aside to dry, and as they're drying, let's put together more of this gingerbread house. So I'm adding some strong adhesive to that little flap of the door for the gingerbread house, and I'm going to attach that here, right in the center. And you can see it opens and closes. I could have added a little black piece behind that to kind of show that it opens into the house, but I wasn't going to be opening and closing it too much. I just thought it was a cute little feature. You could add that if you wanted to. And I'm just going to put together the two windows. So there's two types of windows within the set. There's this one, which I cut two of to put on this card, but there's also another wider window that you could use as well. So if you wanted to, you could change up the design of the house and maybe just have the door to the left or the right, and then have one larger window on your gingerbread house. And then you could add more of the candies to the top half of your card for your design. So for mine, I wanted to keep it a lot more symmetrical, and that's why I've done the design this way. It's just my preference. It's completely up to you how you do it. It'll look great either way. So I've put on my two windows there, and I'm adding my window sills with some foam strips just to give that a bit of dimension too. And then I'm adding my lollipops to either side of the door, keeping with that symmetry that I've got going on. I think the only thing that throws this thing off in terms of symmetry is going to be the gingerbread man in the end. And then I've got the candy canes. I'm going to kind of have them overlapping so that they kind of cross in the center on either side of the house. And you could, add like a lane of candy canes if you wanted to. All of these little pieces work so nicely together, and I really love the extra thought that goes into all of these die sets, they're so full of images. You really, sometimes I use them and I go back to them and think, oh wow, I didn't even notice this die. And it completely changes up your ideas and the things that you come up with and the different card designs you make. Okay, so let's add those snow mounds. Now you can see that, as I said, we're tailoring these dies to this card. One of those snow mounds wasn't going to be enough to fill the entire bottom. So what I've done is I've cut one into 2/3 and added it. And then I'm going to add the full mound right in front of it to create more fullness and to fill in that entire bottom with a bunch of snow. And you can see that glistening and textured snow on the top of those mounds is just gorgeous. It just adds that little extra bit to your card. So once I've got those snow mounds down, and I'm just, again, adding foam to kind of lift them up a little so that those candies in the background don't get lost. Now I'm going to add the gingerbread man. And I'm using just one foam square for this, but this foam square is a lot thicker. This is from the Spellbinders card kit. And it's got double the thickness of all the other foam squares. And since I have a lot of dimension going on, it just helps me stick that gingerbread man on without things kind of not adhering properly. So now that I've got that done, I've added the little squiggle in the center of the house along with another one of those candy swirls. And then all I have left to do is add all of those gumdrops up in a line on those snow mounds. Now for my sentiment, I'm using the set from Simon Says Stamp, and I thought that the sentiment just worked really well with this card. It's believe in the magic of Christmas. And since gingerbread men and all of that stuff has to do with magic and all the fun things to do with Christmas, I thought this sentiment would work well. I'm just heat embossing it on some vellum here, and I'm using some Creative Expressions black embossing powder. Now, I don't know about you, but I'm sometimes weary of black embossing powder because I don't want it to get all over the place. So that anti-static powder tool is important. But I do find that stamping in black ink and adding clear embossing over top is just not the same. Now, to add this to my card, I'm going to need some small foam squares because I want to prop it up a little, but I don't want my adhesive to show through. So these tiny micro foam squares really come in handy. They fit on top of the thicker writing here in the word believe, and wherever the lines kind of cross is where I've put those little foam squares. Taken off the backing bits and I've just attached it, and you can see it sits there nice and well and looks gorgeous. Now, for another idea for snow other than the glitter and the mica flakes, I do recommend using a jelly roll pen. So I wanted to add some snow splatter onto this card, but I didn't want to use acrylic ink because I didn't want it to just cover everything. I wanted it in select areas. So the jelly roll pen comes in handy for that because you can control exactly where you put your snow. And I'm only putting it on that blue background and the brown background of the gingerbread. And I'm just adding small dots, larger dots, a very amount of dots and sizes to make it look natural. And you can see it does its job. The effect is there. Now, as I said, I can't get enough of this, the glitter and those, the little textured, the mica flake type snow. So I'm adding some more of that to the top of the candy canes, the door, to the top of the windowsill and the top of the house here, just to make it all kind of go together and just give it that extra oomph. Now that that's done, I'll add my final bit of snow, which is the embellishments. So Spellbinders came out with all of these embellishments lately, and one of them was this Winter Flurry set. It's got a whole bunch of different gems, pearls, and light blue, and then it's got a bunch of snowflakes in white, light, and dark blue. So I just added the white snowflakes to the background of the card and then a few on the roof. And then I'm also adding some of those lighter blue embellishments to the snow mounds and to a couple areas on the house just for a bit of interest. And that finishes up the front of the card. Now for the inside of the card, I still have that gingerbread Christmas tree. So I want to add that in there in the bottom left corner along with 3 more of those candy swirls. And all this does is uses up all of my die cut pieces so I don't have any extra bits hanging around, and it continues my design from the outside to the inside, which is something I love doing. Now, just to dress that Christmas tree up a little bit, I added some clear gems in the little dots that are on the garland on the tree. And that finishes this card up for today. So that's my gingerbread house center step fun fold card with added snow today. And I really hope you've been inspired to create something similar yourself. Everything that I've used is linked within my blog, which is linked in the description, and that includes the guide or the map of how to put together the fun full card base. I hope you guys have a great day. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll see you all again next time. Bye.